Hey, senders, welcome back to another episode of the Segment Podcast. This is episode 114, and have I got an amazing guest for you. She goes by the name of Christine Hirst Bernhardt, and she is an amazing person, an amazing writer, a talented professional on and off the bike, and we'll get into all that. I actually met Christine when we were doing a session at a feature in Bentonville called Drop the Hammer, and I want to show you what that looked like. This is Christine and her friend Heidi at Drop the Hammer right here in Bentonville on the Colder Trails. And there is Heidi sailing over the top of Christine. We had so much epic footage of Christine sending it off of this thing as well. I think we had sessioned that for like an hour or more that day, and it was a ton of fun. But that's how I met Christine. I got talking to her and realized that she helped pave the way and make a space for women in downhill racing. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I'd love to get her on the show. And then I found out that she is a professor at the universities. She is an award winner for the Thomas J. Brennan Award, and there's so much behind this person. And she's actually a there's all kinds of things. So basically, without further ado, we're going to bring Christine on the show and get to know Miss Christine. Hey, Christine.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Mark. And I want to correct you on that. We were not there for an hour. I'm pretty sure we were there for like 3 to 4. And then we went up and hit the jump line.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was so fun. That was such a fun time. I
It
see
was
that
so fun.
I see a couple of people have joined us. One of the folks that was with us dropping the hammer was Brett Hall with Unspoken. He says, "Yeah, drop the hammer." That is awesome. He was out there with us. Trail Pimp out of Northern California is saying hello. Hello, Christine. We got Timothy Haley. He's saying, Mark, what up?
Yeah, hey,
What's up?
NorCal. I did my undergrad in NorCal.
Yes. So Christine is done. Man, Christine, as I got to know you the day we were dropping the hammer, and then we went up and we sessioned cease and desist. I think that was an epic trail. And I found
Mhm.
out that you lived many lives, many lives and did many
Many
things.
lives.
But in the sport of mountain biking, take us back to this is like before there was Instagram, before there was influencers, you were helping pave a way for women in the sport of racing for mountain biking. And can you take us back to that time and what were you doing and what did you do?
Yeah. So I just want to say that there were influencers then. It just looked a little different. This is back when there was Decline magazine, Scott Hart running Decline magazine. And he would put Terry Yanes on the cover or, Lee Donovan or Marla Streb. So those were my heroes. And that was who I looked up to. I had a secret crush on Terry Yanes, and I got to tell her that after she broke her back, and I got to carry her around Sea Otter. That was
Oh
fun.
my gosh.
So those women were really in the heyday of downhill racing, when there was money in it in the US, and it was on it was on ESPN, and there were mega sponsors. So that was where I kind of came in right at the end of that. I started racing collegiate for HSU, for Humboldt State. I think it's now Humboldt Polytechnic. Yep, North Star was my very first downhill race. I think I laid down and cried a couple of times, but I still got up and won. And I was like, this is so scary, but I really like it. And I just kind of stuck with it. When I graduated college and I started racing, and back then there were different series. So it was Norba, and we would race out of Big Bear, and super sketchy courses, and the race promoters really hated downhillers, and I really loved being a part of the scene. That was kind of like we were snowboarders in the winter and mountain bikers in the summer,
Nice.
and we were really kind of like the outcasts of the scene. But a challenge that I faced was I remember racing dual slalom with Essence Barton, who is a badass. Essence, and I've known Essence since she was 11. She actually went to school with my sister. We're from the
Whoa.
same town. And yes, I do play piano. I was actually a music major for a bit. And, um, And yeah, so Essence and I were racing dual slalom in Big Bear. And because the way the brackets are in slalom, they trim the field down. So they start with all the men because it's obviously a bigger field. And by the time they got to us, there was only four women. So they got to us. We'd been up there all day as they're trimming the brackets down. And they said, all right, guys, racing's over. And they turned off the lights. And it's like 9 o'clock at night. It started to snow. And they sent everyone away. And they're like, oh, head over to the pavilion for awards. And Essence and I are still sitting up there. We're like, we haven't raced yet.
Yeah. Oh,
like our parents are down there. They're like, what the hell? And so, I mean, we had to race in the dark. And
no way.
A couple years later, I remember winning the national title. And because they made the women go last, they gave away the small jerseys. So they gave me like this massive like nightgown of a jersey. And, you know, there was just stuff that was happening like that all the time where it was like the women were last. We were so deprioritized. We would have to race after the kids. And at that point, you know, you'd be up at the top, you know, and seating for downhill. It's like, usually they'll put the fastest people first. And they would just, even when I turned pro, often the pro women would race after the kids. You'd be up there forever. And
Wow.
you get down and, you know, they'd have course holds and the course would be so chewed up. And it was just so frustrating. And then when I was in Southern California, I started making some connections with like Azonic, and they wanted to put me in their women's gear. But back then there was really this mantra of just shrink it and pink it. So I remember having these knee pads that were the kids' knee pads that were pink. And I'm pretty small. I'm like barely 5 feet tall. So these knee pads and shin guards like went into my shoes.
Oh.
And so I would have to cut my knee pads, and I couldn't find helmets that fit me. And I had a helmet sponsor who will remain nameless that told me to put a beanie under my helmet so it would fit me.
No
And,
way.
you know, which is from a scientific standpoint, that can actually make you have a secondary concussion. That's terrible advice.
Yeah.
So just nothing, there was just nothing for us. It was like, we didn't have a space in the scene. We didn't have gear that fit us. We didn't have bikes that fit us. And I just saw this, just like all of these amazing women that were out there funding it themselves, and no place for us, and feeling like we weren't even really wanted. And I just kind of saw this way that I could change that. So I think I had been teaching for 1 year. I had a 1-year-old. I was poor. And I taught summer school to be able to start a team to buy all the stuff myself. So initially, even our sponsors, it was like a pro deal. It took a bit to start getting better than pro deals, to actually getting things free. You know, and even, you know, some of the things we had to pay for, it was just kind of crazy. You know, we had to pay for everything. I had at one point, besides Melissa Buell and Jill Kittner, I had the fastest women in the country on my team. I had Darian Harvey, who was representing the U.S. for UCI. She was national champion. I had Joy Martin, who has Joy Bringeroff Martin. She's won a ton of enduro stuff. She's beat some really fast girls. I had Jen Wolf, who didn't race for very long, but she was a badass. I had Tassa Herndon, who is just a really good time and a really cool rider. She's from North Star. Anyone North Star knows Tassa. And then I had Jackie Harmony. And Jackie Harmony and Lisa Micklak were some of the very first girls hitting mega jumps, like 45-foot gaps. You know, so all of these amazing women, and, you know, the hustle that I had to do to get these women things was just crazy. And the men didn't have to do that. So it just became my goal to just be able to make it easier, at least for these women, so that maybe in the future, other women wouldn't have to hustle that way, you know, that they could just go ride their bikes like some of the men were doing. You know, they could just show up. And, you know, I remember one race, sitting in the gate, and Melissa was there. Melissa Buell, a good friend of mine. And there was like Melissa, there was Nevin Steinmetz, who was a PhD in chemistry. There was another girl, Lauren, who was retired as a PhD in marine biology.
Good grief.
Melissa, who's a doctor. And, and Joy is an engineer, and all of us are in the gate. And I'm just like PhD, 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 engineer, little old me. And then you looked over at the men's gate, the men's pro start. It's like high school dropout, high school dropout, high school dropout. But they were all getting it free, and we're having to work our asses off, and train at 5 a.m. and they didn't have to work.
That's
It was
crazy.
such an inequity. And don't even get me started on what the purses were. I got checks for $2.
No way. Like the paper is worth more sometimes than the actual
I'm not
purse.
even going to take that to the bank. Thank you.
Jeez, my gosh. Now, was the discrepancy because obviously that's a big awakening, for the MTB profession, for the whole industry. Was it like the old good old boys club back then, or were women just getting started? And I mean,
I think
how did we get there? That's so
I
crazy.
think we were just so outnumbered. Because women have been doing this just as long as men have been, Marla Streb was racing, a hardtail with like a 2-inch fork, and she was racing all over the world in that.
Good
Um,
grief.
there was just less. And I think there's just this systemic mentality that women can't do a lot of the things that men can do, that women aren't as fast, that women aren't as strong, women are less publicizable. And there's so many women out there now, like my friend CJ Selig, who is, I remember when she first started jumping, like I think I posted a picture today of us at the pump track together, a day she was there if she's not in the picture. And I remember her just starting to jump, and now she's just killing it. Like there are women doing things that the men are doing too. But it just seems like we consistently have to prove ourselves and fight our way up. And I don't feel like there's the same gatekeeping for men. And there's a lot more opportunity now. I feel like it was kind of like the dark ages, even 15 years ago. So it has come a long way. But we're making some back steps too. Like there was a time when every bike manufacturer had a women's bike. And if you're small like me, that makes a big difference, because I'm going to get nerdy on you.
Yeah.
My center of mass is different than your center of mass. So my center of mass is lower. So for me to have a shorter rear triangle and a slightly lower bottom bracket and a more slacked out head angle, that makes a much bigger difference for me than someone who's 6 feet tall, because your center of mass is going to be like 1.5 feet higher. It's going to be in your shoulders. Mine's in my hips. So when I'm on a bike that's built for me, there's not many dudes that can beat me down something super steep, because it's built for my center of mass, and I don't have to move my body as much to get in the position to slingshot that. But now there's only one bike manufacturer that's doing that, and that's Liv. And they were the first, and now they're the last, because the bike manufacturers didn't think that we were worth it. And that's a shame.
Wow. Shout out to Liv for stepping up to the plate. Now, going back to the time that you saw this discrepancy and you decided to help pave a way for other women, which you did, which was amazing. What did you call that team?
They were Vixen Racing, and there's a European team now that has the name. I passed it along. So if you look them up, they're probably the ones that are going to come up, that will come up on the search engine. But I wanted us to have a name that was feminine, but fierce. Nice. And I thought Vixen really encompassed that. And my goal was for us to not be naked and not make our way that way, and to not wear pink. And we never did either. We were purple, but we didn't wear pink. No freaking pink.
Yes, screw that pink. Dang, Christine, that is cool. And for your pedigree, 2-time national expert champion in downhill, 3-time pro California downhill champion, and you helped pave the way for riders, like you were naming some riders, but some of the riders who followed after you, who were some of the folks that you helped kind of pave the path for?
Oh gosh, I don't think that I did anything. I think I was just loud and proud and maybe like cleared a path. But one thing that I helped get off the ground in terms of coaching was an organization in Southern California called Girls Gone Riding. And someone approached me wanting to get more women in the sport, asked me to be the coach. Lee Donovan's now the coach of that. And she and I have coached a bunch of things together for that. And they now have like hundreds of women, if not thousands of women, in multiple different chapters. And that's single-handedly gotten so many more women involved. Like if you go to anywhere in Southern California, and you see women riding, they're probably a part of that group. That's probably how they started. So I'd like to think I had something to do with that. I used to wear a little bit of bling when I would ride, and I think that that helped normalize that you could be feminine and ride. Like I used to actually ride with pearls, and like I bedazzled my shoes.
Sick.
um, and like Rachel Troop came up to me and said, mentioned that to me, I think when we first started racing together. But it's been really neat to see, like, kind of, it's like my racing era has ended, which is partly due to injury and partly because I really like school and I just keep going. But seeing girls like Amy Morrison is just crushing it. And she's a fellow science teacher. So I love that, of course. But I remember like when she first started riding in her first race, and, she's just come so far. So, I definitely didn't have anything to do with that, but it was cool to be a part of her journey. So that was really neat. And, I think I knew a lot of people in the industry. And if you ever see a Purple Cove shocker, those were our bikes. There's still a few floating around Bootleg Canyon. And I think there's one in Angel Fire. Those were the Vixen bikes. Like they made them custom for us.
That's
You like
awesome.
pink stuff?
Yeah.
You would like pink stuff.
Right and dirty. What's up, brother? He says I like pink stuff.
Yeah.
He does. Purple stuff is dope too. I mean, purple's the color of why is it escaping right now? But purple is the color of royalty. So
That's true.
there you go. There you go. And now you have like people like Rachel Strait, coming up behind you guys. And I know that you don't want to take a lot of the credit for helping pave the way, but definitely you put a spot in there and created some noise in order for people to pay more attention to this division. And now looking at it today, I mean, there is a lot more going on for women, which is awesome. A lot of clothing brands I see are putting out things. I know Zoic is doing some things. Tasco is doing some things.
Darko, yeah.
Darko.
I feel like most of the clothing manufacturers now have a women's line. I mean, it only took how long for them to realize, like, we have body parts y'all don't have.
Yeah.
And we're shaped a little bit differently. Like we got boobs and we have booty and like, And I see in the chat, someone asked if I'm in Nova MTB. Yes, I relocated to the DC area.
Yeah, we had a question here from Robert. He says, "Aren't you in 703 now, Nova MTB?"
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So that's
kind
of moving out of biking now into what you're doing today. I mean, obviously you're still on the bike. You still rip. I mean, I think the first glimpse I caught of you was when Eric and I were at Drop the Hammer. And I just see this like long blonde hair, like whiz by me with your rider Heidi behind you. You're sticking out your tongue and having a blast, and you were just dropping the hammer over and over again. And I think at one point you were speaking Spanish to people too. I'm like, was that blonde hair girl that was speaking Spanish? And yeah, which was cool. And then I started talking to you, and you were like, STEM is my jam. I'm like, wait, what? STEM is your jam? And you're like, yeah, I teach astronomy. I'm like, what the heck? So have you always had the love? Obviously, you've had the love for mountain biking, created this wonderful space for women, Vixen Racing, that great team. And then now you're a professor.
I am.
How did you make that transition?
Was just hired at a new university. So I am now like kind of making the transition to academia. I am now a professor at University of Maryland Global Campus.
Oh, dang.
Trail monster. Oh, let's see. Another 10. So I've taught high school STEM for 16 years, I think. But before that, I came out of Northern California, and I was really like a hippie mountain biker, backpacker, and I taught outdoor school and really loved it, but made the transition to classroom and just really loved teaching kids about science as a way to understand our world. And oh, there I am. And space was my first love, but I didn't think that I could do it. I didn't see any women represented I didn't know that space was actually something you could do as a job besides being an astronaut. And I didn't see any female scientists. I didn't have any representation of that. I didn't have any female science teachers. so I kind of went a roundabout way of that. I was a music major first, and I got to teach astronomy. And I actually was taking classes with it as I was teaching it and just learning more and more. And
Oh, wow.
I really wanted to make it just the coolest class ever. So I enrolled in a master's degree in planetary science. And all the science I was doing, I had my students do. So they ended up launching high altitude balloons. They captured stratospheric microorganisms. We launched tardigrades a couple times. We captured cosmic dust. Not we, they.
Yeah.
They did
But you
just
with
such
them.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I just gave them the space. I just kind of got out of the way.
I see what you did there.
All the puns. Yeah, so I just created this space where they could do science, like real science, no textbook, no curriculum, just like what, if you sent something to space, what conditions would cause it to change? And if you understand those conditions, what could you send up that could change? And how do you think it's going to change? So the whole course was built around these experiments. And then, yeah, I wrote a paper. So last year, I applied actually during the pandemic to both PhD programs and a program called the Einstein Fellowship. And the Einstein Fellowship takes the nation's top STEM educators and places them in either federal agencies like Department of Defense, cybersecurity, NASA, or a couple of people are placed in congressional offices. I don't know what they were thinking putting me in a congressional office, but that's where I was. And I got to spend that time really diving into policy. And I wrote this paper, and I was actually in a podcast about that a week ago. And that was really neat. And it was really an opportunity to dive into what sort of education our students are getting, because I knew my little microcosm, but young students are getting something very different. And I really changed a lot of my focus to try and bring quality experiences that don't have to involve a textbook. I think we get it all wrong. You know, there's so much science that you can just get outside, and we need to be able to bridge that gap. So that's one of the reasons I'm getting my PhD is people listen to you when you have those letters. And I really want to be able to bring better science to teachers that are already really good teachers and validate what they're already doing. Because we have a lot of systems in place that tell teachers right now, especially coming out of the pandemic, that everything they're doing is wrong, that students are so far behind, and oh my God, and the only way to fix it is to buy more textbooks and do more tests. And I think that we are going to end up in a really bad situation with that. So, but yeah, and I'm also an astronomer. That's one of my other lives. So I was just at an Earth and Space conference the last couple of days, and I lead a ton of outreach. And I'm an astronomy professor in my other role, in addition to being a teacher. So I teach now at 3 colleges.
Grief.
Yeah. And those are like my side gigs. And the one I was just hired at, I think that one might end up being full-time, but I'm not sure. And then I've taught space camps in Hong Kong, and I did space lessons in Slovakia last year. Yeah, that's my research project. I just did an international study in astronomy education with 10 countries. And that was really neat to just look at like how they're bringing, I think that conference was Toronto. That was in May, right before I met you. Looking at how countries are doing things like putting telescopes in communities, in community centers in Mexico and in Nigeria, and using astronomy to bridge gender gaps in schools. And the margaritas. Those are amazing teachers, one from Nigeria, one from Japan. They're both involved in my research study, and they're just doing incredible things to bring STEM to their communities, to teachers, to students, outside of school, and through the lens of astronomy. So really, really neat.
Wow. That's
So
cool,
yeah,
Christine.
that was a cool experience. Toronto's a cool and weird town too, by the way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old meets the new there, right? Like
Yeah.
that
So, you know,
architecture.
it's allowed me to kind of travel all over the place. I'm going to a conference in Greece, in the beaches of Greece in August to present that conference as well, or to present that research.
Man.
And yeah, I kind of try and merge my professional interests with my travel interests. So like conference in Greece, I can get on board in that, applied, get accepted. And yeah, it's been really neat. I got to teach in Hong Kong, and went all over Southeast Asia, and yeah, it's been awesome. Oh, I see
That is
from
really
Bentonville.
Oh yeah, we got Lisa Blount on here. She's saying,
Heck
"Hello from
yeah, the
Bentonville. I
women.
just watched the video of you all dropping the hammer. Awesome. I'm enjoying hearing about Christine's journey and her fight for women's mountain biking. Heck yeah. Welcome aboard, Lisa. Appreciate you being here."
Thank you.
So you're catching so much air on the bike that you decided to go to astronomy and study more of the air through the stratosphere all the way up through. You have always had this affinity to the stars, the sky, the whole thing. And then I was reading on your paper that you published another big push and another gap that you found, just like the gap that we saw in early mountain bike competition. You saw a gap for STEM and science, quality science for elementary school kids.
Yeah. So that was partly during the pandemic. I had the challenge of homeschooling my own child. And he was fortunate enough to have a science teacher as a parent. So a lot of the things that we were doing, I was just like, let's not do it on the computer. Let's actually build a stream table. And he already knew that the way we crush cans in our home is by, making a vacuum and putting it in cold water. So there were a
Whoa.
lot of things that he already had access to and knew, but seeing the caliber that they were getting and his teacher was fantastic. But I just couldn't believe that level of what they reduced science to. It was sad. I was like, God, no wonder we'd have kids that don't want to go into this. You made it so boring. It doesn't be that way.
Right.
And when I was on the Hill last year, I got the opportunity to work with another fellow who was really passionate about this. And we got to work with the National Academy of Sciences. And they put out a report highlighting the big gaps. And 60% of students don't get any science until 6th grade or 7th grade.
Whoa.
And of the ones that do get it, it's less than an hour a week. And that's really big when they get 3 to 4 hours a day of English and reading, or reading and math. And that's a problem, when we talk about the workforce, the STEM workforce, and there's all these policy pushes to diversify, but they're all aimed at college or, young adults return to work. And all the research tells us that if you don't get kids by the time they're 8 or 9, and just like if you think about a language, you're never going to turn them on to a subject. But the irony is that because kids are natural scientists, that's why a lot of the science was removed, is because someone somewhere thought that it was, a good idea, since they naturally are curious and kids naturally notice patterns, that it's okay if we just leave science until later. Let's just, drill and kill the reading and the writing and the math.
That sounds very backwards, right?
Right.
That sounds crazy.
And if we look at other countries, they're not doing it that way. So I've spent a lot of time looking at that, speaking about that. And, just as a way of humanizing school. I think that we've just really missed the mark on a lot of things coming out of the pandemic. And that's something I'd really like to change. Oh, that was at Space Center Houston. That's a conference I get to go to every year, which is awesome. That's an amazing astronaut down in front. Which astronaut is that? Oh, I can't tell.
That is, let's see if you have it listed here.
I don't know that I do. I'm trying to remember if that was this year. He's also a Spanish speaker, and I think he was actually a teacher first. And his name is escaping me.
Wow.
I apologize. I suffer from the effects of long COVID. I at least blame that for when I can't remember That's awesome.
No, I mean, you've done a lot. And now when you're kind of pushing those boundaries, like you say here in this, or someone says here in this post, pushing the boundaries for science in elementary school, are you making any headway, or are they still so bent on doing it later on for these kids?
Best thing about conferences is the parties, by the way.
Different countries.
There are conversations that are happening, and there's research that is happening. But like a lot of things, it's like moving a glacier. And it's, there's a lot of challenges. So there's a lot of people talking about it, and it's on a lot of people's radar, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, just like in mountain biking. You think about Bentonville, where I just came from, right?
Yes.
You
Oh
had
my
someone
gosh.
that moved in that brought in a ton of money that just poured into developing infrastructure and systems to support that infrastructure. And STEM's the same way. So, we just really need that big investment. So my big push is like, even in talking about space, like space isn't just about discovering distant galaxies and dark matter. It's being able to explain our relationship with the world around us,
Mm.
atmospheres, the hydrosphere. It's not just about like cosmology. I study planetary science. So I look at planetary surfaces, and turns out we live on one. And
Right.
it's not about producing a world of astronomers or a world of engineers. That would be a really boring place. I can't imagine having a world of that. But we have to have people that can explain the world around them and read a graph and interpret data and understand fiction from fact. And that those are just the skills of scientific literacy. So that's the headway that I'm trying to make, and trying to convince people that we don't need a textbook or curriculum necessarily to do that. Yeah, that picture, that was really cool. I got to fly aboard a NASA mission called the Sophia mission that was just decommissioned. That is a gutted 747 special plane, that has a telescope on it now in the back. And it's an infrared telescope. And a lot of the infrared field is now covered by James Webb. So that was sunsetted, I believe, in December. And they had an incredible program that took teachers on board. So I got to fly on that. It was amazing.
Wow, that you've got to do
Oh,
so many great things. And
and
those so
Nick, that is a very large question, my friend.
Nick is saying, Christina, do you believe there is life on other planets?
Oh gosh, how much time do you have?
Yes, we have time. I
Well, let's see. That's a very loaded question. I always tell my students I will not answer that until the very last day of the semester because it takes them way off track.
oh.
Um, so there's a lot to that one. There are two camps in the field of space, that there is and there isn't. And they both have repercussions. Either we're alone in the universe and it's a lonely place, or we're not. And both of those have serious implications for us as a species. So, and they're both kind of equally terrifying. When you consider that, either that we're completely alone or that we're not. But the crazy thing is if we think about humanity as a technological species is very young. So when we're looking for life other places, it may not be technological, but if it is, it means that maybe technological species have a finite lifetime. And the way that we look for that is not just like, biological signals, but radio signals. And, if we think about us as a technological species, it's probably what, 100 years, 50 years?
Yeah, super
But
young.
yeah, we're super young, but we can only see as far as light travels. So, when I'm looking at you, I'm seeing you as you were, a millisecond ago. So if you think about like lightning and thunder, you see lightning before you hear thunder because light travels faster than sound. So in terms of space, we can only see, if you think about like how far out we see, that's like looking back in time. So our closest star is 4.5 light years away. So we're seeing it 4.5 years ago. And
Jeez.
our next closest stars, and that's like our next closest star system, but our next closest planetary system is like 75 light years away. So we're seeing that as it was 75 years ago. Well, us 75 years ago, we were still testing atomic bombs above
Right?
ground. So that
Yeah,
means they're seeing us then too. And how they see us is going to influence how they would interact with us. Would
right.
they see us as peaceful? Would they see us as warring?
Yeah, those
We
crazy people
we don't
down
have a
there.
very good track record.
Right.
Um, we don't have a very good track record of coming into contact with other groups of people, let alone other organisms.
Yeah.
So
Somehow we got Thanksgiving out of one of them. How did we do that? How do we pull that off?
oh man, whole other can of worms. That's a good
Right.
American. So we're looking. We know that life on Earth started and stopped many times, and life happens when you have the right ingredients. Life explodes. It's happened on Earth. We've had 6 or 7 mass extinctions, and every time life has restarted again. So everywhere on Earth where there's the right ingredients, including geothermal vents, the tops of volcanoes, nuclear reactors, anywhere where there's the ingredients for life, life happens. We have extremophiles here. So life happens easily and everywhere where you have the ingredients. So if a place has the ingredients, sure, but we haven't found it. And, if it does, it's probably going to be very single-celled organisms. And there's also a lot of criteria you have to have those ingredients. And some estimates are that we are the anomaly.
Whoa,
So,
that sounds so scary if
yeah,
we were.
that would be kind of crazy if we were.
Right.
But another line of thought is that, we see shooting stars all the time. They're not shooting stars, they're meteors, by the way, but they're space debris that are falling in. And we found debris from Mars. We found debris from the moon. You can look up at the moon and see craters. Mars has been hit by impacts, and the early solar system had a lot of impacts. So Earth was hit by an impact. That's how we got the moon. So we know that there was a lot of impacts early on. And it's very possible that a life-bearing planet was impacted and those ingredients were carried to Earth. And if you think about that original parent body being Mars and that material being carried here, that would make us Martians.
That would make us the aliens.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa, that's crazy. That hurts my head, but it makes sense. We're children of stardust.
Yeah.
that came down here. Now, I have very novice questions because I'm a student with all this stuff. Did the moon, is it theorized that the moon was actually part of Earth, or was the moon something that hit us?
Kind of
Earth? Okay.
So Earth was hit by a very large, planet size, probably Mars size impact.
Good
It was called
Lord.
Gaia, and it hit Earth when Earth was still molten, and part of it spun off and became our moon.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Both of those are correct.
Holy cow. And the thought that this has started and stopped multiple times, if an impact were to hit today and wipe us all out, how long would it take for us to be able to have this live stream again? How many thousands of years could that be?
I don't know. I know in geologic time, it's really fast. And there are some species that are really resistant to it, like turtles. Turtles have survived multiple, maybe it must be their shells. And crocodiles, they are largely unchanged. Birds are, direct descendants of dinosaurs. So we think it's pretty quick, especially biota in the oceans, that it starts again really fast, because life wants to happen. So if there was a space that had the right ingredients, life would, it seems as though systems lend themselves to life. But that being said, to answer your question, I happen to think that we're alone. I think that we're the anomaly.
Really? In this zone of the universe, or the entire universe? Because it's so vast and huge.
I know. There's actually an equation. If you really want to get into it, then I'm not going to get into it.
Equation?
Yes, the Drake equation, exactly. And it all depends on what the lifetime of a technological civilization is and how many there are. And if those numbers are very low, then statistically, it couldn't happen more than once. Where do I find the time to mountain bike? I get that question a lot, actually.
Wow.
Early mornings, I ride. When I was in Southern California, I rode a lot at 5 a.m. Now I ride in DC, the riding is, sorry if someone else is in Nova here, but it's not Bentonville. We'll say that.
Politically correct about it.
Now I have to drive to ride, which kind of stinks. So I can only ride a couple of days a week. So there's Washington, D.C. And if you go just to the left of that, where that little green spot is, there's the Pentagon. I live right by the Pentagon.
Oh, wow. Dang.
Oh, that was Arlington National Cemetery. So it's just below the green space. So all that green, that's Arlington Cemetery, and I'm in Arlington.
Okay.
But if you zoom way out, the best riding is northern Maryland, called the Shed. It's like way up there to the top of your screen. That was further up. But when I first moved here, I remember posting on this Facebook page, hey, you know, I heard that the shed is really good downhill. I'd really like to go. Is there anyone that could show me around? And someone posted on the page, they were like, so since you're new, you should probably find a guide who's really good with beginners.
Oh, geez, what an assumption that was.
Right. And that happened a couple times. It's like, wow, I guess this is what I'm facing being in a new spot. But yeah, there's that spot, the watershed, is about an hour and a half from me. There's some local things, but it's taken me a bit to get used to riding in trees and roots. I'm not as used to that. So yeah, like way up there, there's riding. There's a couple bike parks within a couple hours. I haven't been to Snowshoe yet, but I want to. That one's like 4 hours away. Yeah, I do. I ride a lot of road here on a gravel bike so that I don't have to be limited to the pavement. I do a lot of gym. I really like to be really strong. And after my third knee surgery, I couldn't ride. I've now had 5. But after my third, I just hit the gym a ton. I got super into CrossFit. And so now I kind of try and balance the riding and the gymming.
Yeah, as a female rider, is it harder? Obviously, you're like Lisa's asking, when do you have the time to ride? And your day is packed, you know, with you're a family woman, you got the kiddos, you got the hubby, you got the job. And if you're riding in the morning, something that maybe us guys don't think about, like I can go in the dark early in the morning by myself and feel fine. But is that different for a female?
I've only had a couple instances where I've been like legitimately scared. I'd like to think that I'm a badass and I'm fine. But I on the mountain bike, I actually ride with my dogs. I have a anaphylaxis bee allergy, and we are training my 2 dogs, one to get me help and one to stay with me. So I've got like 30 minutes and I'm going to die. So that's kind of always more at the front of my mind than people. But that said, I did have a super scary encounter with like a crazy dude. And I was actually with my dogs and he was telling me he was going to kill my dog. I had to call the police.
Whoa.
But riding in the morning out here, not so much actually, because there's so many bike commuters in the DC area. There's so many professionals and so many people that ride bikes. And actually it is such a bike friendly place. You actually don't need a car. So last year, going to Capitol Hill, going to the capital of the United States, I rode my bike. I would bring high heels in my backpack and go to like receptions and go to things like, I would keep like a little travel curling iron in my desk, and I could freshen up when I got there. It was definitely a transformation, but there's so many people here that do it. That I think the bigger thing is like making sure your bike is locked and you don't leave things like your Garmin or your helmet on your bike because people steal it.
Will they snatch your helmet? Your helmet?
Oh yeah.
No.
You definitely gotta like bring it with you.
Oh my gosh.
And it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable like locking my bike up here, because my gravel bike it's like a really expensive bike. So I would like actually bring it into the Capitol and and yeah, that's the US Capitol. So I worked in the Longworth building right across from that. That was my very last day. And coincidentally, on that ride home, I tore my meniscus for the 5th time.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I was not wearing clip shoes and I went to pedal and my foot kind of slipped and I wasn't in the right gear. And I just like pushed down too hard. And that was surgery number 5.
That was a wrap on that. Oh my gosh. And that was, now the other injuries from the knee, those were all from the racing days, or were they not even in races?
Mostly from races. So the first one is I was riding Bootleg Canyon and I just went to plant a foot, and my leg, I don't even remember what surgery that one was. I had that tattoo. So that was at least, I think that was number 4 or 5.
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't even know. I had 2 in this house. But, yeah, that one was just a foot plant. second one was also in Bootleg Canyon. I was at a Gene Hamilton clinic. He did an all women's clinic, downhill clinic, which was awesome. And then I ended up being able to coach for him afterwards, which was really cool. But we were doing long, fast manuals down the road in Bootleg Canyon, if you've ever been there. And I was clipped in, and I knew I was looping it. So I went to grab my brakes, and I was looping back over, and I just unclipped a second too late and put my foot down. And I was probably going 40 miles an hour in this manual. So went over, and my ACL popped, and it popped so loud that the girls around me all thought that a bomb went off. Like, everyone heard it.
Wow.
But at that point, I had already done it. So I knew that I wasn't going to hurt it more. So I duct taped it, and I kept riding.
You're a beast, Christine. Holy crap. Oh,
I actually I called the surgeon within like 30 minutes, and I was like, hey, if I keep riding, am I going to injure it any worse? And he was like, nope, you know the drill. You've already blown an ACL. Once it's blown, it's blown. I had surgery scheduled a month later. It was right before Sea Otter. So I remember I went to Sea Otter on crutches, and Mikey Hatterer and one of his buddies were like having to carry me by the belt loops, like into, up and down the stairs of Monterey, because I was very, very gimpy. But that was number 2. Number 3 was a redo, and that was a soccer injury that like officially did it. And then 4 and 5 were just meniscus, and those were riding.
Good Lord. Good Lord. That's a lot to unpack right there with the knee injuries, and you're still sending it like crazy. Like it's amazing. And I feel like the biggest thing for you was just the anaphylaxis to the bee.
That's the one that like almost took me out, but there's a lot of other injuries I've never had. Like, I feel like everyone else has done the collarbone, and I was a gymnast. So I am the master of the tuck and roll. Like, somewhere lives a video of me not quite making something an angel fire, and I did this tuck and roll and popped like right back up. I never crashed with my hands out, because I know to just
tuck and roll.
Tuck and roll.
No collarbone club for Christine.
Never. Knock on wood.
Dang, right. Tuck and roll master.
No wrists, no. Actually, I do have 2 shoulder injuries right now, but it's from the gym, not riding, unfortunately.
Got it.
Yep. See, Lisa even said collarbone for her.
Yeah.
My Heidi, who I was riding with in Bentonville, she's done her collarbone a couple times. My girlfriend Joy has done hers so many times. She's had to have the bone removed from her wrist and put in collarbone. I know a lot of mountain bikers that have had that.
Yeah, that's a full-on collarbone club. That's one.
Yeah.
I don't want to join that club either, because it does not look fun. It looks super painful.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh my gosh. So how did you find out that you were severely allergic to bees?
Well, my airway closed. I was in college. I was backpacking with my college dog, and my dog disturbed a hive. And I was stung 14 times by bald-faced hornets, which it's like getting hit with a hammer. And my dog drug me off the trail to my car, but I was 2 hours away. And this was kind of the early days of cell phones, but I was able to call the hospital. They were ready for me, and they kept me on the phone. I think my college boyfriend at the time kept me on the phone. But by the time I got there, my body was I was like a turtle. My back was so full of hives. The hives are usually kind of small, but my hives were like this big. I had them on my head, and my hair was falling out.
What?
And so they couldn't believe I made it that long, just on sheer stubborn will, because I'm extremely stubborn. I was like, I'm not going to die this way. So I made it, and I lost like 2 days. Like, I threw up everywhere, passed out, blacked out. They were like, we have never seen anyone have this bad of a reaction and live. And I had like streaking up my arm to my lymph node. And then I was stung again 3 days later. Yeah. So I've just had enough of those. And then just a couple of years ago was stung. I hadn't been stung in a while. So I had gotten sloppy, wasn't carrying my epi. And I had just done like my motorcycle certification or something, and had just gotten married literally like 2 weeks before. And we were riding in Mount Pinos in in Southern California, and I had him shuttle me. And I usually do this alone. I go up, I ride up the mountain alone, go down alone. And I was trying to be a good wife. And I was like, hey, why don't you shuttle me? You can be part of it. And
As long as I don't
this,
have to pedal down the hill with you.
right? I know. Like you can be a part of it. You can pick me up and drive me up. And the trail like crosses the road a couple times. And so I was like, here's the spots you check in. And the first check in, I was fine. And in the second one, and I have to watch it, like even like I was telling you when we were riding, I have to think about the colors I wear. And a lot of the women's jerseys are V-necks, and I can't wear those because that's how it got in, and it stung me on the heart. And I got to the next trail crossing, and I threw the bike on the back of his car, and I was so thankful he was actually there. And if I'd have missed that, I would have had to ride 9 miles down, and I probably wouldn't have made it. And being the scientist I am, I was taking my heart rate, and I immediately felt my ear hurt really bad. And I was like, oh, it must be because we're at altitude. And it just kept getting worse. It was like this pounding in my ear. I guess. But it was the beginnings of my airway closing. And we got down, and I remembered that my students had launched a high altitude balloon from this fire station. So I remember there was a fire station. So I kind of directed him to the fire station. But before we got there, I felt like a Kardashian. It was like my lips went, and they just, it was like, and all of a sudden I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe. So we got there, and I was wheezing. I was throwing up, like, and when your airway closes, you can't talk. Like it's like your tongue is too big for your mouth. It's a crazy feeling. So that was 2019. And then the next summer I was stung again. So I'm convinced that when you're allergic and you've been stung a lot, the bees smell the venom in you. So in Southern California, there was a spot I would ride, and they would put out bee boxes. So everyone knew to tell me like, oh, the boxes are out. So I couldn't go up there. So, and that's, it's just kind of a fact of my life. Like I can't ride where there's no service, as much as I would like to, because that's my style. I always have to let people know where I am. I have to carry 2 EPIs with me at all times. I have EPIs in my purse, EPIs in my car, EPIs in my riding bag. I now have a Specialized that has a little compartment, but I'm hesitant to stick it in there because I don't know if it'll get too hot. My kids, like everyone is trained in how to do it. So yeah, and anytime I ride with someone new, I have to show them. Like it's a process, but
when we were climbing up on Kohler, we were climbing up to the top to the hub. I remember Heidi telling me, because you and I were breaking off, briefly from the group, and she said, "Hey, if she gets stung by a bee, it's an EpiPen and then some Benadryl, and then EpiPen number 2." And I was like thinking to myself, 2 EpiPens. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't want to leave you out of my sight when we were climbing. I was like, and you're just like cruising along, like no big deal, I'm on the eye out for bees.
Yeah. And, people that ride with me a lot, if they're not trained in it, then they, I show them how to do it. But yeah, like my allergy is so bad, like that's my protocol is 2.
Dang. Yeah. And for the folks who don't know, usually like it's 1 EpiPen you're carrying around. So 2, that's pretty severe. Do they think that at some point, or is there anything they can do to calm that down?
There's venom treatments that I started, but then my insurance decided they weren't going to cover it. Which is great. Like,
stop.
Awesome. You cover really stupid things, but you won't cover something that's life-saving. But I went through this test where they figure out what venom you're allergic to. And they were like, as long as you're not allergic to honeybees, that's the one that is kind of resistant to the venom. And somehow the test came back that I wasn't allergic to wasps, when those have been my worst reaction, and that I was allergic to honeybees. But apparently the venom testing, or the venom treatment, is every week for 5 years, and it's gnarly, and it's only like maybe a 50% chance. So I still want to do it because 50% is better than none.
Yeah.
But I haven't started it yet, but that's the plan.
Got it. Who did the venom testing there? Was it the insurance company? It's like, yeah, you're not allergic to these ones, but you're allergic to this one, so it's not covered.
Yeah, it was an allergist, and they have to actually like scratch you with all the venom, and see if it gives you a reaction. But apparently, like the actual venom treatment sends you into like a mini shock state, and I've only met one person who has an allergy as bad as mine who's actually done it. And they said it was really brutal.
Wow, dang.
Yes, actually, Nick, I can eat honey. I was worried about that.
So it's just the venom in the
Just
bee
venom.
sting that would do it to you. Now, is the bee sting, like, just so unique on its own, or are you allergic to other things? Like, some people had said that, it's somewhat related to, like, maybe, like, some kind of one of the jellyfish stings or anything like that. Do you have to worry about other type of stings?
I have been stung by a jellyfish, and it did give me a worse reaction than the other people I was with. And I have noticed since that reaction in 2019, I'm more sensitive to things like a tick will, like everyone else will get a little teeny bump, and I get a welt. Mosquitoes seem to, like, I get a really big bump from it.
They
Um,
love you.
so so it does seem like I'm more sensitive to things, but some of those things don't even have venom. So maybe I'm just more sensitive to a lot of it now.
Yeah. Your immune system's just like, "Everybody, let's start the
Yeah.
inflammatory process."
Something good else, let's be on the hunt.
Oh my gosh. And then something crazy happened when after we got done writing, and, I know we can't share I don't think we wanna share the name of the writer, but I got to see you in action because you have lived many lives, and one of them is a medic, and, I didn't know that at the time, but, there we went to a place called I think it was called the Rail Yard
Rail yard.
in Bentonville. Epic, epic, epic park, but this one rider had shorted the pro line
Hmm.
and had hit his head pretty hard in the little G out section and went into, like, a 2-minute seizure, and you were, like, first on the scene, Johnny on the spot, like, "I'm a medic, I'm holding C-spine, I need help." I mean, talk to us about everybody else was a bystander, like, "What is happening?" And you jumped into action. What the heck? That was
um,
amazing, but
So yes, I have lived many lives. And in a past life, I was a park ranger, and I was a park ranger in Yosemite. And I was a wilderness first responder. I never thought I would go into education. I always thought I was going to work in the outdoor industry. It just doesn't pay anything. And I got very tired of living in my truck. Um, but I was a wilderness first responder because I was leading trips, and I worked in the backcountry. I was in like the north part of Yosemite, and before I was riding a lot, I was really into rock climbing and backpacking. So I was always places that were really remote. This is before I knew I was allergic to bees, by the way. Um,
dang.
and I thought that so I'm trained in how to do long-term care when you are far from a facility. So like I can reset a shoulder like no one's business. I can hold traction on a hip. I can make a splint out of a stick. I can glue someone's tooth back in with super glue, which really does work, by the way. And like I said before, I can duct tape an ACL like I did mine. um, and it's just come in so handy with mountain biking. I can't tell you how many times, because I would be racing too, I would see a terrible accident and I'd be the first one there. So it's just happened enough times for me that like I know that I can be calm in the face of pressure. And I think that's just kind of the person I am too. Like for me, um, obstacles are a gas pedal, they're not the brakes. So
Oh, I
if I
love
see
that.
things that maybe would freak other people out or that would make them pause, for me, I'm like all in. Like that's like my zone. So whether it's seeing someone who's seizing, or if it's writing a dissertation and big deadlines, like for me, like those things, I'm like, bring it, it's on. But yeah, that situation, I saw that, it was like as soon as I saw him crash, um, I always kind of have an eye of like, okay, are you getting up? And he wasn't getting up, and I realized he was seizing, and he was on his side. So I knew that he needed to stay there until he was done seizing, and we needed to hold traction. And it was actually better that he was on his side so he didn't like swallow his tongue. He wasn't choking. But I just needed to be able to stabilize him until he was done seizing. And I've actually been in contact with his dad. He's totally fine.
Oh,
Um,
good. That was freaking scary.
yeah. And
Whew.
the medics that did arrive were not in any rush to get him to the hospital, which was
That was
really
scary too.
frustrating.
Yeah, that was really
Like,
scary too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 minutes out with that type of thing, and then what seemed to be fine at first was like, "What happened? Where am I?" Simple questions that he was able to answer, and then
Yeah.
he started regressing pretty
Yeah.
quickly and asking the same questions over and over again, and that was scary because I was thinking like, "Oh my gosh, is there, like,
His
pressure?"
level of
And it's
consciousness was continuously decreasing. So
yes.
like Heidi is trained as a medic as well, my girlfriend, and she told the medic, she's like, he's AO1, he can't, he got to where he could only remember his name, which is, so you have like a rating scale of how you would rate, that level of consciousness. And it wasn't until the medic like heard that was like, okay, maybe we should, hurry up a little bit.
Maybe we
But
should turn the
even it
lights
took him a
on.
long
Yeah.
time to even get the color on him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they see enough of those that they're just like, "That's the routine crash," but this one
Yeah.
seemed pretty not routine.
It definitely seemed not routine. And when it was a young person, and he was, when he was coming to, and then they went to strap the collar on him, they didn't even like talk to him.
I know that
And
was
I was
bad.
still right there in his face. So I'm like, they're just replacing my hands. That's all they're doing. And was
Yeah.
able to like calm him down.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he was definitely pretty scared. But it's come in so handy. Like I was at oh gosh, back in Fontana, we had, I think it might have been the US championship a couple of many years ago, not a couple, I'm not going to lie, but there was, I was the first on the scene to an accident. And there was a guy who had landed, and he was a huge dude. He had landed after a drop upside down, and all the blood was rushing to his head. So he was starting to come to, but he was getting really combative. And because he couldn't come to, because he was kind of laying downhill, and I had to move him and had to, get some help. And it got to where I would always check in with medics when I would get to a race and be like, "Hey, I'm here." So they would know there's a medic on the track too. Because I could get there quicker than they could having to go up. But there was the U.S. National Championships a few years back where a buddy of mine had broken his ankle, and he knew that I could tape it. So I taped his ankle, and he won. He won, I think that was 4-cross. And every now and then he'll do a post, and he's like, "It's because of Christine's tape job." And I popped in 2 shoulders at that. I remember I was in the parking lot, and like people come up, they're like, "Hey, I hear you can pop my shoulder back in."
I've got one more stage to go. I don't want
Yeah.
to DNF.
Oh, this is pre-enduro. This is like 4-cross and downhill.
Dang. Dang, Christine. That is crazy. Yeah, I got to see you in action. And like you said, there are only 2 obstacles, the gas pedal or the brakes. And you were
Yeah,
definitely
2
on the
options.
gas pedal. And you were on the gas pedal at Kohler too, because we dropped into cease and desist. And I was gonna film you guys with my GoPro. I had my GoPro on. I was like, all right, roll and film. I got Christine, the space teacher. I got Heidi. And then poof, where'd they go? I there's a little bit of dust, and I can see you guys in the air up ahead of me, and you guys kept getting smaller and smaller and
Did that whole
smaller.
thing with my shock lock too.
I remember that. That was gnarly. That was so gnarly. Oh my gosh, Christine, I can't believe we're already at an hour with the podcast. It's been so awesome to catch up with you and to see you
Me too.
again and all the great things that you have going on. Is there anything on the podcast that we didn't get to share about your journey, about the mountain bike industry, about
Mm.
you with education?
Um, I think there's a lot of intersections with mountain biking and education. And I was thinking that, if anyone was interested in maybe making YouTube tutorials or channels and the physics of mountain biking, I think that would be
Ooh.
really cool. And maybe Bentonville would be the spot for that. Um,
Oh, like a
and
scientific episode around
mm,
the physics of mountain biking.
that would be very cool. There
Oh,
are a lot of scientists, ex racers that I think would be very into that. And, for women, we like to be able to analyze things. And, we are very analytical. We are, by nature, the more intellectual species. And, we think things a lot. We want to be able to understand all the steps of doing stuff. So that's one thing that I always brought with me to coaching, and why I love coaching women, because we need to hear things a little bit differently than men. And men, that doesn't mean we need to mansplain. So there's nothing I hate more than a mansplain.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Same, same. Even as me as a dude, it's like, "Oh god, I'm getting a lecture here. Oh no." Lisa is saying, "You're a rock star, Christine. Keep making that impact in people's lives."
Thank
Totally
you,
true.
Lisa. We should meet
Totally.
up next time I'm in Bentonville because I definitely want to go back.
Yes, yes. And then speaking of, for people to follow you when it comes to your mountain biking and to you as a professor, where is the best place that they can follow you?
So my Instagram, I was MTB mommy for a very long time, but I am now the space teacher on Instagram and Twitter. I don't go on Twitter as much anymore, but feel free to follow me. I had to have that private for a lot of years because I would have students that would stalk me. But it is now not private. So I'm trying to actually like make much more of a social media presence than I could when I taught teenage boys.
That's exciting. That's exciting. The space teacher on Instagram. Go check out Christine in there. And then as far as things that women need, if you're talking to a woman who is looking at a mountain bike and thinking that they want to get on, but they're a little intimidated about the sport, what would you tell them and what kind of bike or maybe what kind of bike company would you steer them to?
I am a huge fan of Live because like I said, they were the first and they're now the last. They are also entirely engineered and employed by women. So it is an entirely different bike, unlike Juliana, that's just the points of contact. Live is entirely engineered from the tires to the bars by women for women. So that's the number one thing I would say. One thing I hear from women a lot, and it drives me crazy, is they think that they have to find a bike that they can stand over, and that gets under my skin a bit because you're not standing on the ground when you're riding.
Mm.
So that's, I think that's something that we need to, my dog is trying to get in the room. He might crawl on my lap. Um,
Cute.
he's not small. But, I think just changing the narrative from like you have to be able to, I don't know where that idea came from that you had to be able to stand over a bike. And I hear a lot of people tell women when they first get on bikes like they need to lean back going into sections. So I think there's just such poor advice out there, and it all really feeds into this fear narrative.
Mm.
And that fear narrative of like leaning back and react instead of being proactive and being in positions that are aggressive.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that our speech and the way we frame situations on the bike perpetuates that fear. And then when you ride tense and fearful, you crash, and then you're just more likely to do it again. So I think that if you're bringing someone into the sport, if you're bringing in your sister, or in my case I'm bringing in the guys. That was my litmus test for all of my boyfriends, by the way, was if they could keep up with me on San Juan Trail. And just being cautious of the words you use and the language you use, and that how you frame things is going to have a direct impact on how people carry things on the trail. And not putting fear-based negative spins on things that don't need it, because riding should be fun. It shouldn't be something we're
Yes.
scared of. And it should be a stress relief and a way to get out into nature and to shred. And for me, it's like I feel like such a badass on the bike that then being able to carry that with me in other aspects of my life. But I definitely had to overcome a lot of the fear-based mentality. So yeah, that's definitely something I would say is to really think about mindset and what mindset you bring to the bike, because that has the biggest influence of how you ride it.
God, I love that. That's a great answer. And you definitely are a badass on the bike and off the bike as well. And now let's go to if you're a kiddo, elementary school age, you're a mountain biker, why should you pay attention to science, or why should you pay attention to astronomy in class? And why should
Oh
you ask
man.
to have more of
Wow.
it?
That is a great question. If you are a kiddo that is in elementary school, it is your generation that is going to be the next group of people going to the moon, that are going to be colonizing the moon. It is going to be when you are in your 20s and your 30s, and you could actually get to be a part of that, whether you're an astronaut on the mission or you're one of the engineers designing that. There's thousands and thousands of people that are behind these things. And, space is the most rapidly changing field. That's how we learn about climate modeling and defense systems. And it's so a part of our lives. And it's so dynamic. There's so much more to learning about space than just moon phases and, Galileo's moons. There's just so many aspects of that. Like I look at planetary surfaces and see how they change and what we can learn about our planet from those spaces. So it's not all about just learning about other worlds, it's about learning about us and how to take care of our world. And there's just so many ways to get involved in it. Like I'm really interested in kids doing citizen science, like using their phones to be able to pick up data that's usually space-based data and being able to report back on that. Like there's just so many ways to get involved with science that are not what you traditionally think, like a microscope or a textbook. So it's an exciting time because there's so many opportunities.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So kiddos, yes, that is it. Space, science, start early. You guys are the next generation. And if you're on the
Yeah.
mountain bike, I mean, the geometry of everything, how it works, how you're looking at things, you can definitely apply that to what Christine's doing out there. Christine Hirst Bernhardt, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Really appreciated
Thank
your
you for
time.
having me.
I loved it. I loved it. And folks there in the chat, give her a follow at the Space Teacher on Instagram. And we'll see you guys all out there. See you guys soon.
Thank you guys.